1, 2, 3.
It's time to talk fantasy football. Get your squad ready for this week's action with Frank and the Purple Rain crew. Now, live from the Fantasy Wire studios and home of the Casual Conversation podcast, it's the Purple Rain Fantasy Show.
What is up? Welcome to the Purple Rain Show. Proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Network. You're listening to the home of the Casual Conversation Fantasy Football Podcast. We're in week 9 of the NFL and fantasy season. I'm your host, Frank B. You can find me on Twitter at FantasyWireHQ and online at thefantasyfootballwire.com. On the website, I just literally updated it with starts and sits for this week. Risk reward players. I get my rankings updated typically on Thursdays before kickoff. So check it then for the Fantasy Pros rankings and much more. So check that out. Bookmark it. FantasyFootballWire.com. You can follow the Purple Rain Show online as well and the crew on Twitter. We got all our contributors. We got fantasy articles, NFL reads, Raven-centric content, of course. So today, I want to thank you for downloading the episode. Give it a share, a retweet, comment, leave a review, tell a friend. Really, really appreciate it. Today I want to get into, it's week 9, so we're rolling into the fantasy season, the NFL season. The playoffs are on the horizon, so they are in our line of vision. I want to start off with talking about some just fantasy advice. I mean, even some basic stuff for week 9, some situations, scenarios that kind of go down in the year right about this time, whether it's trades or just dilemmas. A lot of things are dilemmas with trades, flipping a roster, turning some players over, setting lineups. Setting lineups can get a little tricky too. You overthink some players or some matchups, and you can look at the damn guy a million times and who he's playing and just kind of get in a conundrum of, do I, you're splitting hairs at some time, at some point with players with, well, this guy's better, this, or, a stat catches your ear. Maybe it's a highlight or a video on Twitter, a little clip, and you can be going from locked in to starting that guy in a flex to leaving him on the bench. So right now, I guess I'd start off and go, listen, if you're down low in your league, you get 3 wins, 4-4. I mean, you're not looking too great, right? You've got to this point. So fantasy playoffs are going to start week, say, what is it, 14, 15, 16, depending on how your league's set up. So this is the time when you got to make some moves. You got to be bold, but you don't have to give up core players. So on Twitter, I'm getting a lot of questions and messages about should I trade player A for 2 players or player B? Player A is like a primo guy, like DeAndre Hopkins or I don't know, just Christian McCaffrey. And it's like, don't give up your core guys. There needs to be a player or 2 on every roster that they're locked. They're not tradable. They're off the market. Usually I keep everybody open, but there's 1 or 2, man. I'm just not trading them. They're consistent. These need to be your consistent players. They deliver you your points week in and week out. You can count on them. You can put them anywhere. They're going to perform. Maybe their bye week's already gone by, even better. But don't give up those guys. I mean, I think the biggest thing would be is if you can get a decent, if you're looking at somebody in return, say it's a big name, you're going to have, this is week 9, you're going to have to, be bold. You're going to make a big move. You may have to give up a little more if you really want to pull something off, but don't be afraid to try to package stuff. I love 2-for-1 trades, 2 for 2, a top tier player and then maybe a little straggler or something behind him, or just somebody you could throw in a flex, maybe a bench in a couple weeks, maybe somebody that's got a nice matchup for the fantasy playoffs. Kind of look at it that way and always look ahead, look down the road to the fantasy playoffs. These players that I'm looking at, who are they playing 14, 15, 16? I want to know those 3 weeks. I'm looking at those 3 weeks. Are they favorable matchups? Are they bad? Are they Are they locks? I mean, you make your own decision. Use your gut, of course. But I try to do that. And like I said, going back to like the package deals, I try to work package deals a lot with a player. If I get an offer for player A for player B, okay, it may be all right. But what if I could flip a lesser player or even one bigger name to really get that other person to pull the trigger and do it. It's worth a shot. I mean, it's the art of the trade. You can reject as often as you want. You can send a message, let them know, hey, how about this? Counter me something. What do you think? What are your thoughts? Go back and forth. I mean, trades should always be open communication and civil. I mean, you don't have to be an asshole or nothing if it's some ridiculous trade, because I mean, remember, nobody's going to give you their best offer up front. I mean, this is like no different than buying cars, for God's sake, right? You're not going to give up the farm or give the best price right up front. You got to wager, you got to negotiate, you do the dance. So I think that's, I got a few leagues where I'm 4-4. I'm not winning too many. I got 3 wins in another. The other one's 6-2. I'm all over the place. I do a ton of leagues, but the leagues that I'm struggling behind right now, last week and this week, this is what I'm doing. I pull up the league. I scroll down to the bottom. I look at everybody's worst teams. I look at the strengths and the weaknesses, in my opinion, for each of those teams. And then I'll go back through again and I'll go, okay, well, let's see. Team, 5 is DFL in this league, right? So what are their strengths? Okay, they got 2 players I would love to have on my team that could make a difference. Then I'm going to look and say, okay, what does this team need? What do they need to get out of their hole? I'm going to use something I can part with to get that deal done. So try to look at it that way and just start with one team at a time. Maybe take a pen and paper and just write down a couple of players that you like off each team. And then to the right of that, maybe put down their strength and weakness, overall, in your opinion, for the team. Because the person's got to know, damn, I need wide receivers. I'm running back heavy, but man, my team sucks for wide receivers. Throw them a good wide receiver, get some running backs in return if you need running backs. So kind of play around with it. This is the time. Hit it hard. Be fair. Negotiate. Like I said, don't be an asshole, but I think you can get some stuff done. Hopefully turn it around and get into the fantasy playoffs at the end of the season. Just get in, and then you can make a run. That's all you need to do. We can get into some NFL news and injury updates. The big injury bug. It's every week. Chase Edmonds, hot waiver ad. Pissed a lot of people off this week, but he's out with a hamstring. I mean, the week after he goes off on the Giants for 127 yards, 3 TDs. Now everybody rushes to put him on their lineup, and look how that turned out. But anyway, I don't think he's going to be back for quite a few weeks. Unclear if David Johnson's going to even suit up again. They've got, Kenyon Drake in the mix, so Edmonds is done. James Conner, shoulder now. I mean, he's been banged up. They're running him. Mason Rudolph at quarterback. They're going to lean on the run game here. So even Jalen Samuels and Benny Snell were out with knee injuries. So keep an eye on them. They were limited at practice. Connor's a big question mark this week. I think he's one of the guys I'm going to pay attention to right up until kickoff to see where things are at. Miles Sanders for the Eagles, shoulder again. 74 yards and a TD on the ground. 3 catches, 44 yards. He was rolling. He was balling out on that Bills defense. 118 yards on 6 touches, but breakout performance. Left the third quarter with a shoulder injury. So we'll have to see. They're saying he's not going to miss any time, but you have to think the Eagles are going to be cautious with their it was a second round pick. They're not going to leave anything to chance. So Royce Freeman, Broncos, another shoulder injury. Matt Breida, ankle injury. Tevin Coleman is pretty much running things in that backfield. Breida was a nice compliment, but keep an eye on Breida. Joe Flacco, my neck and my back. Herniated disc in his neck. Maybe that's why he was popping off in that interview. I've never heard Flacco going off like that. That was pretty surprising, but he's out. Broncos are going to hand the reins over to Brandon Allen. Philip Lindsay, I think I like him a lot more this week. We'll get into him later. D.D. Westbrook, Jaguars, neck shoulder. Probably like a questionable tag. Hard to say what he's going to do. Keep an eye on him kind of right up until kickoff. A lot of these injuries, you just got to pay attention on Twitter, NFL.com, Roto-World, wherever you follow for injury reports. Hopefully you got some alerts set up for your phone to hit you for any players that you have on your roster. I'd make sure you set some alerts for these guys if you have them. Sam Darnold, Jets quarterback, thumb injury, nothing crazy. He's fine. He's going to play. Calvin Ridley, concussion protocol. Brandon Cooks, concussion protocol. Cooks was one I was high on last week, and I recommended him to a lot of people. I apologize, but he's in the protocol. He looked like he could have started breaking out. I thought it was his game, but if he can play this week, or I'm sorry, next week, I'd like him a lot. Case Keenum, still don't know on him. Reports are saying Haskins is going to be the quarterback this week. We'll see what happens there. I'm sure Keenum's not even rostered on a lot of league teams. And then Jarius Wright, Panthers leg injury. Marquise Lee for the Jags ankle. Jeff Wilson, 49ers running back neck. Nothing crazy. Probably don't even have them when you're in your leagues, but those would be some additional ones. I'm going to change it up a little bit here today. Every Thursday I go on WNST radio in Baltimore with my man Dennis. We go through the whole NFL game skit. It's pretty cool. I don't know how we jam all that in like a 15-20 minute segment. But I'd like to do the same thing here today. So let's just kind of run through game by game, and I'll just give you a few off of each. You know, all your ones, wide receiver ones, quarterback ones, Rodgers, Michael Thomas's. We're starting them every week. We know that. Let's not get carried away. But I'm just going to do a few interesting ones that are of note to me. Niners and Cardinals tonight, Thursday. Kyle Murray, man, coming off back-to-back duds as a quarterback. Giants week 7, Saints week 8. I think he combined for like 15 fantasy points. It's terrible. Hard to expect a rebound against the Niners. I think he'd be a sit for me. Emmanuel Sanders jumping over to the Niners from the Broncos. Scored his, in his first game with them. So that was against Carolina. He looked pretty good. 4 catches, 25 yards, 5 targets. So I'm thinking, it's his first game. So I'm hopeful he gets more targets this week against the Cardinals. I think he can get it done. I don't think he's going to have too much of Patrick Peterson on the other side, but I like Sanders this week. I think he's a high-end 3. Kenyon Drake, I know a lot of people jumped on him from waivers, getting traded. Yeah, he's trading for Drake, getting a heavy workload in the first game, after coming over from Miami. Hard to say. I think they're going to split it up a little bit. I don't think he'd roll with him just yet. He's like a boom or bust. Actually, he's not even going to boom because it's the Niners defense, but he's one, if you did trade for him, hold tight a game or two and see how it plays out. Nothing you can really do with him there. Fitzgerald, I think he's a sit this week. Houston and Jacksonville, I like Gardner Minshew. He's rolling again. I know it's not a true home game, but no JJ Watt. To put the heat on him, you got to like him this week. Carlos Hyde, he's pretty touchdown dependent, boom or bust kind of guys, like a Sony Michel in New England, but he's had at least, he scored in 3 games this season. 2 of them, he had at least 12 PPR points. 5 games when he's failed to score, he's averaging like 7 points. I mean, he's a frustrating player. I think, him, if you need to run him in a flex, go ahead or stream him if needed. Tight end Darren Fells came on the scene for the Texans. I think he's worth starting again this week for the Jags. He's got 12 points in 3 of his past 4. So he looked good against Oakland. First game without Will Fuller, Fells had 6 for 58 and 2 touchdowns, 6 targets. So those Will Fuller shares are going somewhere here. I like him. I like him to continue the trend here. Jets and Dolphins. Oh my God, anybody playing the Dolphins, right? We all know that. Mark Walton's been a hot waiver ad. This is his shot to be the quality 2. Now, whether he does it or not, we know this is the Dolphin team, but tank for Tua. But the first game without Kenyon Drake, 14 touches, 6 targets, 3 receptions. I think he, hasn't had this touchdown yet in his 2-year career, but I could see him getting in there this game maybe against the Jets. We'll see how that rolls. He's going to split with Balaj working the goal line, so that may kind of vulture into his goal line opportunity. Robbie Anderson for the Jets. Dolphins on defense are without their top cornerback, Xavier Howard, with a knee injury. So I like, a bad secondary to get even worse. So I think Darnold and Anderson can take full advantage of that, even Jamison Crowder. So I like those 3 there. Colts and Steelers. Mason Rudolph. Kind of, I mean, what'd you think? He's going to set the world on fire coming back from the concussion and all that. He had to get things going. It took him a while against the Dolphins. I mean, when you hear the Dolphins, you're almost drooling, the Homer Simpson drool, because it's the Dolphins. But Rudolph I guess he was serviceable, 20 fantasy points, an easy matchup, but he had to get into the groove there. I think it gets tougher for him this week against the Colts. Colts have not allowed a quarterback to score more than 19 fantasy points since week 2. That's pretty interesting. I never would have thought that thinking Colts there, but Steelers side of the ball, Deontay Johnson. I love this guy. If he's out on waivers, I've had a few people. It's hard on Twitter when I get asked, who should I go after? Well, shit, man, I don't know who's on your damn waiver wire. So I always say, screenshot me your waivers I just want to get an idea of the flavors that are out there, right? And then a lot of them, I still see Deontay Johnson on the waivers. How has nobody taken him off yet? You got to go get him. He had his best fantasy game in week 8 against the Dolphins. 5 catches, 84 yards, touchdown, 7 targets. Go back and look at his history. He's getting involved, target share, opportunity. He's got a touchdown in his last 3 games. Mason Rudolph, this is his guy. I thought it would go with James Washington and Rudolph, former teammates, but it's not. It's Johnson. That's his guy. So keep a hot hand. He's almost making me feel like DJ Shark, the first 2 weeks where he was stepping on the scene, kind of the same feeling, kind of going there with him. So I love Johnson. I'd lock him in. Bears and Eagles, Carson Wentz. He hasn't really been a good fantasy quarterback. I mean, he scored more than 15 points in only 4 games. So past 3 games are on the road. I think I can give him a bounce back performance here. It's against the Bears. The Bears without Akeem Hicks on that defensive line are a different team. Wentz averages 22.7 fantasy points in 3 home games. But the Bears are what I thought they were. Without a fuck. I like him this week. I think he's like he's a solid streamer if you need him. If you're in a pinch and you got to play him, absolutely. But I don't think he's going to set the world on fire. But I think he can get it done this week. Jordan Howard, I think it's a revenge game. We all love revenge games and the angles there, storylines and everything. But I think everything is kind of coming into focus at the right time for Howard. Like I said, Akeem Hicks off the line. Chicago's defense has allowed a running back to score a touchdown in 4 games in a row. 2 big games they gave up against Josh Jacobs and Latavius Murray. So I like Howard. He's coming off a 23 carry game against Buffalo, 96 yards, touchdown. So man, you got to like him this week. Dallas Goedert. This guy is outplaying Zach Ertz. Who the hell would have believed that to start the season, right? Man. So I think I'm buying into him. I think he's a low-end starter in some deep leagues. Past 3 games, 12 catches, 139 yards, 2 TDs, scoring at least 9 points. I mean, that's going to get you by at the tight end spot to a degree, depending on who your opponent's playing. If you don't have the top 4, tight end guys, so players, I go there. I'm still going to start Ertz over him, without a doubt, based on upside, but Goedert's worth using this week against the Bears. Redskins and Bills. Josh Allen. I think he's getting better week to week. I think he's looking a little bit better each week. He scored at least 20 fantasy points in 3 games in a row. I think it's a good test for him this week. Washington's held the past 3 quarterbacks to fewer than 11 in each outing. That's Dolphins, Niners, Vikings, but it's still an interesting stat. They're playing a little bit of defense over there, but for the first 5 games this season, Washington allowed opposing quarterbacks to score at least 25. Now take out, like I said, Dolphins, Niners, Vikings. I think Allen could get it done this week. I think he'd have a nice game. Devin Singletary, this past week they let him loose. Man, negative game script against the Eagles, but this game I think is like some big home run hitter kind of plays, in place of Gore. They're still gonna use Frank Gore. They're gonna sprinkle him in, who ride a hot hand, so to say. But I think Singletary's got some opportunity this week to really break off some big runs. If he can break something outside, get down the field, I think there's some good opportunity for him. Case Keenum, concussion. We talked about him for the injury report. Who knows if this guy's even going to play? It's hard to say. If Keenum plays, it kind of helps Terry McLaurin, but even with Keenum out there, I'm still almost shying away from Terry in most leagues. It's just, it's the Bills. I mean, the Bills secondary is legit. I think they've been great. McLaurin's been held to 8 PPR points in fewer of his 3 past 4 games. 2 receivers, only 2 have scored against Buffalo this year. So I'm not too high on Terry. John Brown, Mr. Boom Bust Brown. We got to think of a nickname for that guy. Boom Bustastic. I don't know. We'll call Shaggy up and sing it to him. Against the Eagles, 5 catches, 54 yards, 8 targets, man. He's over 50 receiving yards in every game this season. So lock him in for 50, right? He only has 2 touchdowns though. We got to get him in the red zone. I think it's a good week to trust him against Washington, of course. 1 receiver, scored at least 11 PPR points against the secondary. In 7 of 8 games, I think Brown's a high-end 2. And plug him in. Absolutely plug him in. Tennessee and Carolina. This is a total meh game for me.
Ooh, here we go.
Tannehill was pretty solid past 2 games against Chargers and Bucks, but he put up like 22 points in each game. This is going to be his toughest matchup against Carolina. Their sneaky good defense. I'm only going to use Tannehill in like a 2 quarterback or super flex league. Panthers have allowed 2 quarterbacks to score at least 20 this year, which were Kyler in week 3, Minshew in week 5. So Carolina's also backing it up with 6 interceptions over the past 2 games against Winston and Garoppolo. So we'll see how Tanny does on the road as his first start on the road, but I'm kind of leery on him here for this week. Corey Davis too, total letdown last week. 2 catches, 9 yards, 6 targets. Come on. 6 PPR points or fewer in 3 of his past 4. So I don't trust him. Curtis Samuel on the Panther side, it's a struggle for this guy to get consistency, but I think this week he's a low end, wide receiver 3, a flex play against the Titans. Delaney Walker with the ankle, he's out again, so you got to lock up Jonnu Smith for sure. He's been getting plenty of looks. Minnesota Vikings and the Chiefs, Kirk Cousins. Man, if he's got Adam Thielen back, I love him because the Chiefs' pass defense is not good. Sammy Watkins, he came back from a 2-game absence against the Packers. He finished 5 catches for 45 on 8 targets. So they're looking his way, whether, for Matt Moore. We're going to see if Patrick Mahomes plays. I don't think he does. Cannot see it happening. Andy Reid is not that careless. You can't take a chance. He's a franchise. You're not going to risk injury to this guy for the rest of the season and totally zap your playoff chances. So I think it's Matt Moore again this week. Tampa Bay and Seattle. Jameis Winston is the ultimate roller coaster quarterback. This guy is insane. I'm so glad I don't have him. I don't want him. But points, he'll get you points each week, but he's also going to throw some picks. He's got 7 picks in his past 2 games. That is insane. I think he's going to have a productive fantasy outing, I guess, by the numbers against Seattle. Seattle's allowed 3 quarterbacks in a row to score 20 fantasy points. Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson, and even Matt Schaub, Mr. Pick 6. How did that happen last week? I was so sure. I mean, that was almost one of my lock and loads. So that bodes well for Winston on the road, but I think you trust him as like a low-end starter. Same kind of thing. 2 quarterback league, super flex, something. DK Metcalf, he looked hot against the Falcons. First 2 touchdown game of his career. So lock him in. I like him this week. Cameron Brate, total disappointment last week with OJ Howard out. You'd think he'd come around, and I think he only had like 6 points. I mean, Arians is not using tight ends here in Tampa Bay, so I'm going to stick with him. Like I said, tight ends are tough to come by. If they can get you something, he's got the opportunity there. And if it's a Tampa Bay team having to keep pace with Russell Wilson and the Seahawks, then he's going to have to spread the ball around. So you could play him, but I mean, it's like it's a scary play. Detroit and Oakland. Matt Stafford, start of the week in week 8, man. Giants, 29 fantasy points. He's got 28 in 3 of his past 4 games. So the run game is pretty suspect for the Lions right now. No Kerryon Johnson. So I think it's another matchup where Stafford's slinging it. Oakland allows the most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. We all know what Aaron Rodgers did last week. So I'm locking in Stafford. A benefit to that pass game now without, the Kerryon Johnson running is Danny Amendola. He stepped up the past 2 games, 16 catches for 200 yards, 19 targets. I mean, look at where he started, and it's perfectly in line when Kerryon Johnson was out. So Kerryon struggling to run the ball is when Amendola stepped up. I think it continues. He's got a nice game here this week. I think he's worth buying as like a wide receiver 3, definitely a flex, PPR. You got to like him against the Raiders. The Raiders are number 27 in fantasy points allowed to receivers. Derek Carr slinging that ball in Oakland. He's got a good matchup, I think, against Detroit. He's at home. Lions are terrible against, opposing quarterbacks defensively, but the Lions defense allowing 3 passers in a row to score at least 22. So Carr just had his best fantasy outing against the against Houston with 29. So give him a multiple touchdown performance here. I mean, I could see him putting 2 up on the board. I think he's a low end starter, but I think he's, even if he's not throwing couple hundred yards, I think he can squeeze 2 touchdowns in there. Tyrell Williams, he's scored in every game he's played this season, which is pretty crazy. I think it continues this week. Now, he was out for the 2 games, week 8, and he's due. I think he's probably the only outside skill position guy that's a legitimate threat for the Raiders, and he should see a Lions defense with Darius Slay hamstring coming back from the hamstring. You gotta wonder how good is he going to be? Is he going to be able to lock him down? Is it number 1 Darius Slay lockdown corner, or is it banged up hamstring Slay corner? So I'm going to consider Williams a wide receiver 2. I think Derek Carr is going to get him the ball along with Darren Waller, of course, but those are your 2 guys there. Green Bay and the Chargers, 70% of tickets sold are to Packer fans in LA. So that is going to be Green Bay West, baby. Phillip Rivers, numbers say it's not going to happen, right? But I think he lets loose against the Packers. The Packers give up so many plays underneath, middle of the field. It's like when they play zones, I mean, those guys get open and they get yardage after the catch. So without Ken Wisenhunt, who just got fired, he's going to be throwing to keep up with Aaron Rodgers if Aaron Rodgers stays hot, which I think he will. And it could be a garbage time performance. You know what I mean? So I think Rivers will be slinging it to either keep a lead, come from behind, garbage time. On the run game side for the Chargers, Gordon and Eckler, I'm firing both of them up this week. I know Gordon hasn't been good from, since his holdout, but this is a good game, good opportunity for him. Without Winston Hunt, like I said, I think Winston Hunt, he's jacked up a lot of offenses. If you look at his track record, I mean, he's got his spots. Don't get me wrong, he made it to a Super Bowl and all that, but man, I don't know. Maybe it's his play calling or what he tries to do. It's hard to say, but I think having Anthony Lynn more involved in that play calling is going to help Gordon get rolling. So I think his involvement elevates both of them. I think they both can catch a ton of passes out of the backfield. Eckler is also a guy that I can see doing a lot of damage to the Packers. The Packers have trouble with these shifty backs, and I think Eckler, I think he's a flex, but I think he can do some damage. Jamal Williams for the Packers, gotta love him. I love him as a flex. He's been at 10 total touches or less in each of the past 2 games. So production-wise, he's there. I think he's had a good matchup against the Chargers. He's got 12 points in 3 games he scored, and that was against Detroit. But either way, he's getting it done on the ground and in the air. They're throwing him, targets in the pass game. 11 catches on 13 targets. Jones, obviously, is your clear star of that backfield. You're not going to take him out. You're going to lock him up. But Williams, I think he's got a chance to do good against the Chargers defense that's allowed 5 touchdowns to backs in their past 4. 6 running backs, at least 65 total yards against the Chargers over that span. So I'm going to lock him up there. Browns and Broncos. Phillip Lindsay, Royce Freeman, they're going to grind. You got Brandon Allen at quarterback for Flacco, so I think it's the Browns' bigger defensive weakness is the run game, so you got to lock up Lindsay and Freeman at the running back spots. Baker Mayfield, I'm not going to start him this week. It's hard to trust him. He averages 12 fantasy points a game. It's awful. He's got a tough matchup against the Broncos. Denver is number 3 in fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. Only Gardner Minshew in week 4 scored 20, so I'm not starting Baker. Noah Fant, tight end for the Broncos. I think he's trending in the right direction. It's a shame Flacco's out. We'll see what Allen does with him. I think he's more of a boomer bust guy this week. He had 5 for 26 on 8 targets in the first game for Denver since they traded Emmanuel Sanders. So obviously, Sanders' target share is going to get moved into Fant, but we'll see how you got to see how Allen does in this game. I think Fant is a boomer bust. If you got to play him, you got to play him. I wouldn't go drop him yet, but just keep an eye on him over the next game or two and see what happens. My game of the week.
Yo! Saddle up! Lock and load!
The Ravens and the Patriots. You know what I'm going to say to New England?
It's Baltimore, gentlemen. The gods will not save you.
Ravens are taking this game. The Ravens are not scared of the Patriots. It's a great rivalry. It's gone back and forth. Big games, upset games, cliffhangers, last minute drops, missed field goals. I mean, this series has been really good. I was thinking about it today of how many games, it's a good rivalry for not being the same division, but AFC, I love it. I think finally it's in Baltimore again. I believe the Ravens are going to come out with some gadget plays that they're going to have something up their sleeve. I think they're ready for this game. They're locked. Mark Ingram in the run game it's got to be the way that they attack the Patriots defense. We saw that last week with Nick Chubb, 20 carries, 131 yards. Now, Nick Chubb fumbled. Even Le'Veon Bell, going back to when they played the Jets, 15 carries for 70. Frank Gore, 17 carries for 109. That's the formula, right? Don't make Lamar Jackson take this game over and try to win it. Run the ball, control the game, control the clock. So I think that's going to be the play and the emphasis there. So I'm going Mark Ingram this week. He's a lock for me in the running back spot. Sony Michel on the other side of the ball. He's got a tough matchup against the Ravens. They are tough against the run. Sony is up and down, and he's touchdown or bust, completely, all the way. It's a good run defense for the Ravens when Brandon Williams is healthy. No running back has more than 65 rushing yards in the games that he's been on the field at defensive tackle. So I would elevate James White and Rex Burkhead in the Patriots backfield over Sony. But for what it's worth, 5 games this season where Burkhead has played, Sony's averaging 6 PPR points. So I'm taking him out this week. Marquise Brown, he is Mr. Boomer Bust as well. He is expected to return. Missed the past 2 games with an ankle injury, but man, it's a tough matchup. The Patriots defense is for real. They've allowed the fewest fantasy points to opposing receivers. Golden Tate in week 6 is the only receiver to score against that secondary. And that they've had Juju, they've had Terry, they've had Odell. I don't like Brown. I don't even want this guy on my roster. He's just too up or down, and he's the prototypical player that when you have him on your bench, he goes off, and when you start him in a flex or you start him at a wide receiver position, he bombs. So that alone, we talked about, strategies for fantasy and what you're doing at week 9. These are the players I try to stay away from. I don't want to go after them. I want consistency. So Brown, to me, he's boomer bust. Maybe he breaks out. He gets loose all over the damn field. Who knows? But to me, it's boomer bust. Dallas and the Giants to close out the week. Daniel Jones, he had a great matchup last week against the Lions. He had 35 fantasy points. I think he goes backwards against the Cowboys. I know they met earlier in the season, but Dallas defense has been dominant against most passing attacks. They kept Aaron Rodgers in check, Carson Wentz in check. They were held to fewer than 12 fantasy points or something there in each of those. Jones, prior to his big outing against the Lions, 14 fantasy points or less in each of his 4 games. So I don't like Jones this week. Michael Gallup, he's another one people have been talking about trading away or trying to get. He's kind of on both ends of the spectrum, but the past 2 games he struggled, combining for 14 fantasy points, but he was solid against the Giants in week 1. 7 catches, 158 yards, 7 targets. I got to give him a repeat performance this week. I mean, the Giants allow the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing receivers. I'm going to lock him up this week. Jason Witten at tight end. I think it's a tough one for him. I think he's a sit this week. He's got a great track record against him. I mean, you could consider him maybe a top 10 if everything goes to plan. He scored in each of his past 3 meetings against the Giants, including the week 1, 3 catches on 15 and a touchdown. But Giants haven't allowed a tight end to score since that game. So for me, I'd have Witten on my bench, but I think ultimately he's a boom or bust player. Like I said, if you need to play him, you play him. But otherwise, you could see what happens, take a chance. Anybody you want to cut this week? Anybody that's pissing you off that you are so done with? You know what to do.
Screw you! You're fired! You're fired! Whoa! You're fired! You're fired!
How about Baker Mayfield? Are you anybody firing Baker Mayfield this week? I think he's a cut. I think he's a fire. Get rid of him.
He gone!
He's owned in like 72% of leagues, but has not thrown multiple touchdowns in any game this season. None. Week 8 against the Patriots. I think he's got a hip issue or something. His motion, I don't know. He's not scrambling like he did last year. So Baker is a cut. Twice as many interceptions as touchdowns through 7 games. Biggest fantasy quarterback hype bust this season. Gio Bernard. Anybody still have Gio Bernard?
He gone!
Hard to believe people keep wasting a roster spot on this guy. Even if Mixon goes out and you want Gio as a handcuff, do you trust him behind that line? No way. Chris Thompson, Washington Redskins.
He gone!
How is this guy even still owned? He's in a lot of leagues at this point in the season, being as injured as he is. He missed the last 2 weeks with a toe injury. I mean, he's coming back to a Bills defense. I think the Redskins are getting Darius Geis back from IR too, so Thompson's gone. I don't need him.
He gone!
Demarcus Robinson for the Chiefs. Don't need him. Tyreek Hill's back. Sammy Watkins. Jacoby Myers for the Patriots.
He gone!
Cutting him. I think his fantasy hype came to an end here after the Patriots went out and got Mohamed Sanu, so I don't think you need him at all anymore. Those would be my cuts this week. Nothing crazy. I know some guys you want to hold on to just to see maybe another game or two, and we'll go over them in the upcoming weeks. But everybody else,
He gone!
hey gone. Let's jump into some real picks.
What kind of horse y'all got? Lion horse! What kind of horse y'all got? Lion horse! What kind of horse y'all got? Lion horse! Y'all boys ready? Yeah! Y'all boys ready? Yeah! No! Y'all boys ain't ready? Shit! Somebody light me up! Boom!
Niners, Cardinals, battle of the red teams. Thursday night football. Cardinals plus 9.5. Give me the Niners all day. Jags and Texans. I'm really interested in this game. I think this is going to be a really good game. Jacksonville plus 2.5. Minshew Magic. Watson Mania. I don't know. I'll take Houston all day there. Give me the Texans. Vikings, Chiefs. Chiefs are favored by 2.5. Nobody's still. I don't know. I mean, Minnesota's going on the road. Green Bay just did Kansas City bad. I think if the Vikings can get Adam Thielen back, this game is pretty tight. Until then, though, I think it's Matt Moore going up against that Minnesota defense. Give me the Vikings, man. Zimmer's too good, to game plan. He could take more right out of that game plan. Jets, Dolphins plus 5.5. Give me the Dolphins. Don't care. Steelers, Colts. Steelers plus half a point. Hook, baby. Plus a hook. Give me the Colts all day. Brissett's going to run around that field, but either way, give me the Colts there. Bears and Eagles. The Eagles minus 4.5. This game just feels like it should be tighter than that, but I guess, give me the Eagles. I'll take them. I think they can cover that. Bears have looked awful, absolutely awful. Titans and Panthers. Panthers are favored by 3.5. Give me, I don't like Tannehill on the road, so give me the Panthers to cover that. I think they can win by a touchdown. Redskins and Bills. Bills are favored by 9.5. Josh Allen, I like him. Brown, we went back, we just talked about John Brown, 50 yards a game. You gotta love that, man, especially if they move him around the field. So give me the Bills. Seahawks, favored by 6.5. I absolutely like that game. Lions, Raiders. The Raiders are getting 2.5. They're favored by 2.5 over the Detroit Lions. Nobody likes the Lions going out west. I don't think Detroit, I know the record sucks and you are what your record is, but I don't think they're that. I think they match up a lot better than you think against the Raiders. I'm going to go Detroit there. Browns and Broncos. Denver is plus 2.5. Baker and Allen. Oh, this is a game I hope is not on major network TV for me in my region. But I'll go the Browns. That's a tough one. Denver's defense is no joke, but you got to give the edge to the better quarterback. And even though they both kind of suck, we don't really know anything about Allen. I got to give it to Baker, and especially with Nick Chubb running the ball. Packers and Chargers this weekend. Chargers plus 3.5. Give me Green Bay all day. Patriots and Ravens. Ravens are plus 3.5. Ay. I gotta go New England here because I cannot use my heart. I gotta use my head. So I'm going Patriots. Dallas and the Giants. Giants plus 7.5. I will take the Cowboys straight up. They'll destroy them. Those are my picks. I think that'll do it. Last week, I think I had 9. Let me check my record here. This is good podcasting. Yeah, it was 9 correct, 9 wins out of there last week. So I'm not the best, but I like to have fun. So that's going to wrap up week 9. As always, thank you very much for listening, supporting the show. Drop a comment, share the episode, hit us up on Twitter with anything you want to hear, any lineup questions. We'll talk fantasy, profile your squad. It's a casual conversation podcast, so I'm down for anything. Like I said, it's just for fun. So hit us up. It's Sunday, 8 a.m. Central Time to kick off. Hit me up on Twitter for Livewire Sunday, and I will answer all your lineup questions or player specifics in lightning speed. So as always, good luck this week. Get your teams together. Make a run. It's time. Remember Kevin Green telling Clay Matthews in the Packers Super Bowl? It is time. So get it done. If you got a question, hit us up. I appreciate you guys listening. We'll see you back on the next pod.
Yeah, all right. This press conference is over.
Go away.
No, it's over, Phil.
Well, please,
it's over.
That wraps up today's episode. For even more fantasy football content, find Frank on Twitter at FantasyWireHQ and online at thefantasyfootballwire.com. Be sure to tune in next week, and thanks for listening.